And welcome back to Inside Engineering. Thank you all for joining me here in the studio. You may have noticed I'm alone. You may have also noticed that I have a tie. I've got a vest. I got a tie and a vest for Christmas. I had to wear them, obviously. Today is a very special episode as we're going to take a look back at 2019 and some highlights from our first set of episodes. This is something that we plan on doing each year, is taking this look back and sort of enjoying the year and some of the guests that we had. And so today is actually a great time to catch up. If you've missed some of our episodes or if you're just joining us for the first time, you'll get a look back at some of our favorite moments from 2019. We hope you enjoy, and we'll see you back next week for a brand new episode of Inside Engineering. Inside Engineering. Untold stories and fascinating people from the world of civil engineering. This is episode 14, a look back at 2019. Inside Engineering is an RK&K podcast. Learn more at rkk.com. Episode 11. Let's rewind back to the beginning of your career, or maybe even before that. As early as you want to go back, what's something that you wish you had known earlier on in your career?
Ooh.
This could even be like a little bit of advice that you might give to our listeners, a lot of whom I think are probably
that I would
earlier
have
on
ended up in construction.
If
you would have done things differently.
Would you have done things differently?
No, I would have embraced it early on. I wanted nothing to do with construction. My father was always in construction. My father built high rises, and he always said construction, construction, construction. And I thought I was doing something slick by going to school for environmental.
Joke's on you.
And
lo and behold,
I'm here in construction. And I never knew that there would have been a job where doing environmental in construction. Didn't thought that was a possibility. I thought when
there were no degrees back then.
Yeah, it was you were building, and that was it, And I was never a person that liked to build anything.
That's interesting. Well, and it speaks to the kind of opportunities that are out there. These kind of cross-discipline things that are happening. So you kind of both got, you and your dad kind of both got what you wanted, right?
Oh yeah, he's proud.
He's proud.
Yeah, he's proud.
That's good.
I told you, son, construction is the way to go.
I told you, Dad, environmental.
Construction will give you a good life.
Patrick,
if I could go back, I think the biggest thing, and I don't know how you get any training or education in this, but you alluded to it. Like a lot of what we do, it's personal skills, and really in construction, that's what you need. You need the soft skills. You need to get people to do things for you that have no reason to do them other than that you need them to get it done. So I don't know, going back, how I could have maybe focused a little bit more on that. I mean, hopefully it comes naturally to you when you're in this type of field. But that I think is important. And it took a while to get there. I think another thing too that I didn't realize when I first started was that sometimes I felt like as the owner's rep or working on a big project, the contractor was the other team and I was on another team, and it was two teams. And I think that over the years I've learned that it's really more of a partnership when you're working with a contractor and owner, and you're kind of the mediator, you're the go-between, you're trying to get everybody working together to get that common outfall or that outcome. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing I think when I first started in this industry, it was more of a you are on that team and
more of a zero sum.
Yeah. And I think it's not like that. I think the way to get things done is to really work in a partnership.
Episode 4. That's one of the things that's really stood out to me during my time here is the focus on people, and a legitimate focus. It's not just lip service. There's really a caring for people and making sure that they can be successful.
Yeah, I'll say when you think back on your career, once you've got a number of years under your belt, like both Barry and I do, it's interesting to me that most of the memories actually come from interacting with the other people. It's less so about the projects that you worked on. And, again, we've worked on a lot of big ones, some great ones, but, the memories that stick with you are, the fun times, the funny times you spend with your coworkers. So it's so important.
Indeed.
Episode 13.
I also feel like you have fun with your signboard.
Yeah.
For those of you that don't know, Matt sort of mentors all of us in the office, in the Baltimore office every day with his changeable signboard. He's got one of those little boards that he can put letters on, and he uses it to put up inspirational phrases. He numbers them so that we know we can keep track of which one it is.
Yeah, we're on number 12 right now.
We're on number 12,
Yeah.
which is
a grateful heart is a place where miracles happen.
interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
That's like that should be the title of the episode almost.
Right, there you go.
What's been your favorite one so far of the 12 that you've put up?
Oh, man.
There's been some funny ones.
I should have gone back and looked through all of them. That was bad on my part. I didn't anticipate that question.
Oh, I'm
coming.
sorry, man.
Yeah.
Yes, that's my
Yeah,
goal.
there
Is
you
to always
go.
get you with one. No, but
I don't know that I have favorites. The messages are purposeful. Depends upon what I'm feeling that week or that month. They come from all over the place. They come from some of the tea bags that I buy, like on the back of the actual, the little tag has messages.
Yeah.
One of the 12 came off of a Chinese fortune cookie.
Obviously,
you know,
you had to have at least one. That was
yeah,
from a fortune
exactly. I do a lot of reading of leadership articles, books, kind of general, even like self-help type stuff. It's all important. I think a lot of leadership is like, the leadership stuff that you can, read up on and kind of teach yourself. But a lot of like just general self-help, how to be a good person. That's a lot of leadership happens right there.
Mm-hmm.
Episode 1.
And I'm sure you probably saw the other cool thing we did just a couple months ago.
I probably did, but you should probably tell everybody listening about it.
Yeah, I'm gonna. So we did a campaign where we collected slightly worn women's work clothes and donated them in all of our offices to local communities like Dress for Success.
What is Dress for Success?
It is a nonprofit organization that gives free clothing to women who can't afford them or are in need and are seeking out jobs in their communities.
It's really cool.
So we're hoping all of our clothes inspire women to succeed and get on with their careers and advancing their life. We collected 1,500 pieces of clothing between shirts, suits, shoes, accessories. I mean, the wealth was just amazing. And it wasn't only the women at RK&K donating these things. The emails went out to the company-wide saying that we're doing this. And we had staff members bringing stuff from their wives and their kids as well, which was really neat to see that other people were reading this besides just the women of the firm.
Right.
Episode 5.
Bicycle and pedestrian, I'm not only focused on the bicycle aspect of a project, I'm looking at the pedestrian components as well. So, my approach is never going to be, let's take more space back from pedestrians and give it to bicycles. We need to balance out what are the trade-offs and how do we make this facility fit without compromising safety, without compromising operations, at least to too great a detriment. We have to balance all of those demands. So, in that case, where we had to start making some very tough decisions is how do we maintain traffic operations? Because that's one of the biggest challenges on almost every project that I do. We're going to have some sort of adverse impact. How do we make sure that that impact is not too much to be palatable? Because that is, getting back to the human side of the equation, that's where the project really starts to break down. If I'm recommending something that does not work, then we're going to get a lot of pushback, and I'm not going to be able to get that project through the approval process, let alone get it to construction. So we have to really understand those demands, make appropriate recommendations, maybe think outside the box a little bit, which we traditionally have to do. So that might mean that we have to look elsewhere to see how can we make all of this stuff work together. It's not just that street. It's now we're looking at the neighborhood. We're looking in the surrounding area to see how can we make this whole project work to serve the needs of everybody along this one corridor. It's not something that we can just look at that corridor. Now we have to look a little bit more broadly.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, when we start, we're not, we might get a corridor in a study area like this, but our brains immediately go, wait a second, how does this fit into the overall network? Because a city or a suburb or even a rural road, it's part of a bigger living organism. And so, people might think that we hate to say this, but you can't put a bike lane on every road, right? Like, it's just not appropriate. So it's about having an appropriate layered system of how people circulate. So there might be a project that comes along and people say, we want a side path, or we want a cycle track, or we want this. And, Nathan and I, while we love bicycle infrastructure, we'll be the first people to say this is not an appropriate solution. I mean, we feel like that's part of our job too, is just making sure that we're doing the appropriate thing for the entire system.
Episode 2.
What facet of that technology are you most looking forward to? I mean, is there any kind of big, broad brushstroke examples that you could give?
So one thing that I've kind of been interested in is kind of this computer vision. So being able to either in augmented reality or using drones to look at something and then have the AI figure out what you're looking at, classify it in some way, and then kind of give you a result. So, maybe it's change detection, or, you use the drone and you're flying the bridge, and then it can detect defects automatically. So that type of kind of instant feedback is really, really interesting. And I think it's something that in the future we're going to be doing more of.
Episode 10.
Mike, what is something that you are curious about right now, either professionally or personally? What's something you're interested in?
I can say that as I look to hire more talent within the state of Florida, is where all this is coming from. I'm very interested to see how these schools are beginning to ramp up for the type of work that we have. We're involved in a lot of recruiting fairs, but really at the more of the baseline is, what are they teaching these kids, and can they come out a little bit more prepared? I know we've had several discussions about different generations, my generation versus the newer generations coming in. So it's really, how do we make that fit? How do we leverage the experience and the gray hair, as you didn't call me, but my gray hair versus somebody's enthusiasm coming into this market, coming into this area to be a great engineer. That's what interests me, is how we can continue to foster the mentorship of those two. And, really we're working at two different types of people. So how do we make sure that those personalities gel to bring the best opportunities for everybody?
Episode 3.
So you talked about some things that someone in project controls might need. They might need to be detail oriented. What are some other things that someone, early on in their career or looking to get into project controls, what are some skills that they might need to have?
The detail-oriented part's very important, all right? So being able to focus on some of the details associated with whatever you're working on, I mean, that's really a skill that helps you in a lot of different things, but it's almost a necessity for project controls. The next thing that I would probably say is a pretty major part of it is your ability to write, because ultimately you need to produce reports that communicate your findings and communicate what's going on to the stakeholders. At the end of the day, if you're not a good communicator, if you can't write well, if you can't speak well, it's very difficult to be successful in project controls.
Episode 9.
The most exciting thing, I don't know if it's exciting is the right word, but before I came to RK&K many jobs ago, I worked for Thomas Jefferson. I worked for the Thomas Jefferson Foundation at Monticello very early in my career. And we had found, many years before I started working there, they had found half of a porcelain plate in a trash pit that was associated with the Jefferson family, and probably, given the time period, probably with Thomas Jefferson. And then we found a similar plate about a half a mile away associated with enslaved men and women who had worked on his plantation. And initially we just thought it was the same pattern. And then we started looking at it, and all of a sudden we realized they mended together and they were the same plate.
Oh, wow.
And, it's a plate, it's trash. But our theory is that someone found the broken plate in the trash and took half of it back with them to their house half a mile away, because how else is it going to get there?
Right.
And for me, it was just this very interesting moment of like a human being doing a human thing, which is taking something that they found pretty or interesting back with them. And for me, that's like what archaeology is all about, is like you're touching people's stuff, and some of it's their trash, but some of it's the stuff that was valuable to them. And we just assumed it was a piece of a plate, like it was just trash. But turns out, I think it's movement across the plantation indicates it might have been more significant. So that's the story I like to use about my favorite artifact.
Episode 7.
Where are some places, if you're doing a survey for something that's being built or improved, or where are some places that you might typically find bats in I think generally we think of bats living in caves and stuff.
In your attic.
Right, in your attic, right.
Yeah.
Where are you finding them out on job sites?
Yeah, so a lot of times we'll find them. One of the most recent kind of hot topics is bats and bridges. Bats are using bridges as artificial roosts, and they'll go in, they'll use those roosts during the day. They'll roost inside the bridge structure as opposed to in a tree or somewhere else in a rock cliff or something. Certain species seem to enjoy roosting in bridge structures. So recently we've done quite a few surveys for bats in bridges. The Department of Transportation, whichever it is, whether it's in Pennsylvania or Florida or Maryland or whoever needs to do maintenance on a structure or needs to do something with the structure, and there's a colony in there, or there's bats in there, so they got to kind of deal with that as part of the project. So that's one of the most recent things. In the past, we've done presence absence. I've done a lot of presence absence surveys. So just for example, you're building a big roadway corridor and you're trying to get the environmental clearances. There's going to be a lot of timber removal, land clearing, things like that. Fish and Wildlife Service will say, hey, you might have Indiana bats out here. You should probably do this survey, whether it's acoustical survey or a netting survey for presence absence of these species. And we used to do a lot more of those types of surveys, but a little less now because there's a lot less large roadway corridors and things being built than there were back in the early 2000s.
Episode 6.
It's an important question because it shows, it tells us a little something about you. John Reinhart, what is something that you are curious about right now in life?
Besides the fact that I've always wanted to learn how to weld, I think professionally what I've been curious about recently has been the connection between leadership development and training and how it actually both impacts brain development and how the brain reacts to that type of training. Looking at it more than just we're offering you information to truly looking at how do we help you look at a new way to think. Some of the research that's been done on intrinsic motivation, some of the research that's been done on the key role that happiness plays. One of my favorite quotes from Sean Anker is that if you're looking for happiness to follow success, you'll never get there. But if you realize happiness is the predecessor to success, you're already there. And really seeing how just your motivation and how your brain works impacts how you learn and what you learn.
Episode 8.
With technology, surveyors definitely get to do a lot more. I mean, it's not just a total station anymore and a prism pole. It's a 3D scanner that can make a 2 million point cloud in 30 minutes. It's a drone that can pick up large areas to a pretty accurate degree. It's GPS that allows you to bring control into your site without having to run 3 miles of traverse or 3 miles of levels. So, I think we're fortunate to be a part of surveying in this time.